He told the waiter, "She's not with us." So I paid the bill for all 14 people, then canceled his credit card, the one I co-signed. I had wrapped his gift myself, a dark green tie with tiny gold anchors. I remembered once he told me, back when he still needed me to iron his shirts, that green made him feel powerful. So I found the tie, folded it carefully, and tied the ribbon the same way I used to tie his shoelaces, twice around, neat and secure. The restaurant was elegant, upscale, just off River Street in Savannah. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing my best coat and the same earrings I had worn to his high school graduation. The hostess asked for the name, and when I said, "Richard Langford," she raised an eyebrow and pointed toward the back room. The table was long, laughter echoing from it, candles lit, wine glasses half full. I stepped forward with the gift in hand, smiling gently. The waiter, a young man with kind eyes, stopped me. "Ma'am, are you with this party?" Before I could answer, my son turned around. His face flickered, recognition, then irritation. He leaned slightly forward and waved a dismissive hand. "She's not with us. Just give her some bread or something." There was a short pause, just long enough to notice. Then one of his friends at the table, a man I had never met, laughed under his breath and said, "Oh, is that the nanny or just a fan?" Richard's wife, Camilla, did not laugh. She simply leaned toward the waiter and said, just low enough for me to hear, "I told you not to let her in. This is why poor people should eat early." No one at the table stood up. No one greeted me. No one looked me in the eye. I looked down at the gift in my hands. For a brief second, I considered placing it on the table anyway, but my fingers tightened around the ribbon instead. Over the years, I had saved cautiously. From the small inheritance of my aunt, the insurance payout from my late husband, and modest returns from previous investments, I had quietly built a nest. This was no sudden windfall, just careful survival. I paused for a moment, letting the echo of their laughter sink in. Memories of 1,000 meals prepared for him and his friends flashed in my mind. My fingers tightened around my wallet, and I knew exactly what justice should taste like tonight. I turned back to the waiter. "Actually," I said calmly, "I would like to cover 14 meals, random tables, excluding that one." His eyes widened. "Ma'am?" "You heard me," I said. "Pick 14 guests, couples, singles, I do not care. Leave that table out." He blinked, nodded, and quietly stepped away. As the server made his way around the room, the ripple began. Heads turned, strangers smiled. A mother with a toddler waved. A young couple sent me a grateful glance. I left my card, tipped so generously the manager came out to thank me, and then I walked out. Past my son's table, past his wife's smirk, past the silence of people who owed me more than a meal. Outside, the night was cool. I drove home alone, with no music, no tears, just the steady beat of my thoughts ticking against the windshield like rain. I parked the car, sat for a moment, and let the cold night air fill my lungs. No music, no tears, just the steady pulse of thought. Then, the phone rang. Not 5 minutes after I walked in my door, my phone rang. "Mom?" His voice was sharp. "What the hell is wrong with you? Are you senile? Why didn't you pay our bill?" He didn't wait for a reply. "You paid for random strangers but not your own son?" A pause. Then he spat out, "Jesus, Mom, you're not just embarrassing, you're insane." I waited. Then I answered, my voice soft but clear. "You said I wasn't with you," I said, "so I wasn't." And I hung up. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. He was such a bright boy. I still remember the way he used to run down the porch steps with one shoelace always untied, backpack swinging behind him like a cape. He would jump into the car, his cheeks red from PE, and throw his lunchbox into my lap before even closing the door. "Go, go, Mom, I don't want to be late." I was always on time. I made sure of that. Even on the days I worked the early shift at the bakery and the evening shift at the nursing home, I was there, outside the school gate, waving through the car window, rain or shine. He never asked how tired I was, and I never offered the truth. I did not own perfume or jewelry. My dresses were soft from wear and the sleeves a little loose, but they were clean. I did not eat with silver forks growing up, so I never quite learned how to hold one the right way. And I suppose I brushed my hair with practicality, not precision. One afternoon, when Richard was in 7th grade, I came to pick him up. I had just finished a double shift. There was flour on my elbow and a coffee stain near my waist. I remember a boy in his class whispered something to another, and they both snickered. "Your mom looks old and odd. Why does your mom smell strange?" That evening, Richard was quiet. At dinner, he asked if I could drop him off around the corner instead of out front. I said yes. And I said yes the next time he asked if I could stop bringing lunch in foil wrap. And I said yes when he wanted me to wait in the car during open house. And I said yes when he started calling me ma'am in front of his friends. He never shouted. He never said he was ashamed. But the space between us stretched, slow and certain. When he met Camilla, I knew I was not part of the picture they painted for their future. She was polished and graceful and knew exactly which fork went with which plate. She wore pearl earrings, and even when she was furious, her voice never rose. Camilla could insult you like a compliment. One evening, after dinner, I overheard her say to Richard as they cleaned up, "I married a rising star, not a relic." He laughed. I pretended not to hear. Years passed. I attended his events when invited, wore my best coat, sat quietly in the back, and clapped when he spoke. I brought home leftovers and cried over them in gratitude, not sadness, because that was love too. To show up, even when you are shrinking inside. And still, I never expected what came next. 2 months before that night at the restaurant, Richard launched a new business initiative. He had grown quite popular online, an influencer entrepreneur, they called him. One morning, while watering my front garden, a neighbor stopped by. "I saw your son on Instagram," she said. I smiled. "His new post," she added slowly. "It's about you, I think." I wiped my hands and went inside. I opened the app, something I rarely used, and there it was, a sleek black and white photo of Richard at a luxury gala, looking impeccable in a tailored suit, champagne flute in hand. The caption read, "I built myself from scratch. My family did not know the difference between a salad fork and a wrench. My mother never taught me how to dress, how to speak, or how to dream. She did not even know how to smile without looking like she was apologizing. Some of us rise despite the mud we're born in." The comments were filled with praise. "Wow, love this honesty." "True, some families hold you back." "Cut toxic roots, you're the tree now." He had not blocked me. He had not hidden it. He had simply written it, as if I were not real anymore. But that night, when I brushed my hair and looked at my own reflection, lines deeper, yes, shoulders smaller, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. They called me mud, but I was the earth beneath his feet. And still, I did not write him back. I did not comment. I did not scream. I waited. I waited until they invited me to that dinner. And I brought the gift anyway. The first loan was for a used sedan. Richard said he needed it to get to campus interviews on time. The bus routes were too slow, too unpredictable, and you know how these professors judge you if you show up sweaty. He was 20 then. I remember the pen shaking in his hand as he signed the loan agreement, the other hand fidgeting with the tag of his hoodie. When the bank said a co-signer was needed, he turned to me. "I'll pay it off, I swear, but I need your name next to mine." I said yes, because that is what mothers do. Then came the laptop loan, then the lease on his first apartment. By the time he was 27, he had convinced me to co-sign a business credit card and a startup loan. I never saw a dollar returned, and I never asked. I thought I was investing in his future, and in many ways, I was. The businesses grew. He got accepted into a startup accelerator, a small product line, then a podcast, sponsors, an entire personal brand. People called him self-made. I stayed quiet. On paper, I was still listed on several financial documents, but in public, I did not exist. At first, I believed he was simply being protective. Maybe he thought involving family would look unprofessional. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment to thank me, to introduce me, to tell the world she was my first investor. That moment never came. At a holiday gala, I heard him tell a venture partner, "My parents are retired. They stay out of public life." Retired. I was still working part-time at the local co-op. Out of public life? I was standing 10 feet from him, holding his coat. I looked at the printed program that night. The bio read, "From humble beginnings, Richard built his company from the ground up with zero capital, no handouts, and a drive unmatched by anyone in his family line." Unmatched. The only thing unmatched was my cardigan that day. Buttons missing, but dignity intact. I never confronted him. I never sent a message. I simply began watching more carefully. I noticed how his website used the phrase, "first in the family to graduate college," which was true, but not the whole truth. He was also the first to use his mother's credit history like a stepladder. He called his podcast, "Break the Chain." He told listeners that you should cut ties with people who bring nothing but emotional baggage. I sat alone in my kitchen listening to those words. My friends would say, "He's so successful. What a fine young man." I would nod and say, "Yes, he worked hard." And inside, I would repeat, "I worked quiet." Then came the grand opening of his downtown office. I was not invited, but I knew it would be streamed online. I watched the live stream on my tablet, the screen propped up by a sugar jar. He walked on stage, microphone clipped neatly to his lapel, audience applauding. His new logo gleamed behind him. He began, "I built this alone. No help from family, no legacy funds, no safety net." The camera panned across the room, partners, influencers, sponsors. But something caught the light behind him. A screen, meant to show his company's timeline, began to play a highlight reel. The clip was from an expo 6 years ago, recorded by a friend who had captured the moment without my son realizing. For decades it had sat unnoticed, until tonight. A pop-up booth. He was younger, nervous, holding a prototype, and beside him, in full view, stood me, holding the umbrella over his head. I remembered that day. It had rained, and the booth had no covering. I held the umbrella for 6 hours so his sample flyers would not get wet. The audience noticed. There was a murmur. Someone said, "Wait, is that his mom?" Another whispered, "Didn't he say he had no support?" The assistant rushed to pause the video, but it was too late. The room had seen, and more importantly, so had I. He erased me in every line of his script, but not in the lens of that old recording. He came home that night and said nothing. I didn't ask. But I knew. Erasure leaves a residue, and it always shows in the spotlight. The next morning, I put on my best blazer, the navy one with pearl buttons I had only worn to funerals and bank appointments. I combed my hair back, dabbed on some face powder, and walked straight into the bank where Richard had begged me years ago to co-sign his dreams. I asked for the branch manager by name. She remembered me. I remembered her, too. She once thanked me for bringing cookies during the Christmas rush. This time, I brought only paperwork. "I would like to revoke all co-signatory roles associated with the following accounts," I said calmly, sliding a folder across her desk. "Effective immediately." She blinked, then looked at the documents. Her eyes widened slightly as she scanned my name, Richards, and the numbers tied to them. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "Yes, very." It took 30 minutes. Just like that, the weight was off my shoulders. The card he used for client dinners? Deactivated. The backup checking account he dipped into when his marketing team went over budget? Frozen. The car lease in both our names? A pending review. As I walked out, I imagined the moment his transaction would be declined. Maybe a gas station, maybe at brunch with his wife, maybe at another upscale restaurant where someone asked, "Is she with you?" That afternoon, I sat in the office of Mr. Holman, my attorney of 15 years. He had once drawn up my first will after my husband died, back when Richard was still in college, full of dreams and free of shame. Mr. Holman stood as I entered. "You look different today." "I feel different." We laid out the previous documents. I brought proof of my assets, retirement savings, the life insurance policy I had claimed after my husband passed, a few shares in a food co-op I invested in decades ago, and the tidy returns from a modest inheritance my aunt had left me. Nothing flashy, just careful survival. Mr. Holman nodded as he reviewed them. Still no debt. You always managed your finances well. I smiled. I had to. I was managing two lives, his and mine. Then I pulled out a new envelope. I want to update my will, I said. I'm removing Richard. He gets nothing. Mr. Holman paused, then asked gently, "And who will be the beneficiary?" I slid over a photo. A young man in his 20s, smiling, holding a dog he adopted from the shelter, Travis. He was my student once, in my night class, years ago. He checks on me now more than my own blood does. He changes light bulbs, brings groceries. He reads to me when my eyes hurt. Mr. Holman nodded. You trust him? With my final say? Yes. We drafted the new will together. I read every line. I wanted it clear. Travis would inherit the savings, the stocks, the house, everything. We scheduled the signing for the next morning, in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary. I insisted on sending copies to all immediate family. I wanted no surprises, no excuses, and no more erasure. When the time came, I walked into the office with my spine straight and my will stronger than ever. The witnesses sat quietly as Mr. Holman read the statement aloud. Travis stood to my right. He did not smile. He simply held my hand. Just as the notary asked me to sign, the door flung open. Richard burst in like a thunderclap. You're insane, he shouted. You can't just erase me. You're breaking the law. Everyone froze. Mr. Holman raised a hand calmly. Sir, this is a private legal signing. I'm her son, Richard barked. You can't do this. She's not of sound mind. She's being manipulated. I looked him squarely in the eyes. I had not raised my voice in 40 years. But that day, I let it ring. You erased me first. I only returned the favor in writing. He stared at me, mouth open, fury rising. But he had no power there, not in that room, not anymore. The notary stamped the paper, the witnesses signed. The will was official. Travis gently guided me out the door, while Richard argued with a closed system that no longer had space for him. Let the world call it revenge. I call it correction. I had not planned for the world to find out. I thought my decision, the will, the revocation, the silence, would be mine alone. But fate, it seems, had other plans. A week after that dinner, a clip surfaced on social media. Grainy but clear, taken from a server's phone, it captured everything. The way I approached the table, the hesitation in the waiter's voice, and then Richard's words, sharp, dismissive, definitive. She's not with us. Just give her some bread or something. It was followed by the laughter. That snide voice, is that the nanny or just a fan? And the whisper, cold and cutting, this is why poor people should eat early. Within hours, the video racked up thousands of views. By evening, it hit 500,000. The headlines were brutal. Tech CEO disowns mother in public restaurant. Savannah's golden boy? Not anymore. The comment sections boiled over with outrage. How dare he? She raised him, and this is what she gets? Fire this man. At first, Richard's team tried damage control. A vague tweet appeared on his official account. Family moments can be complicated. Some recordings don't show the whole story. Then came the interview. Him sitting in a tailored gray suit, blinking tears into the camera. She has a history of emotional unpredictability, he said, voice cracking. It was taken out of context. I was trying to protect her from media attention. No one bought it. Not after Travis quietly emailed the original clip to the board of directors at Richard's company. Not after Travis followed up with a folder of court-verified documents showing the revocation, the updated will, the evidence that Richard had been removed not out of impulse but after years of disregard. Within days, shareholders requested a vote. 2 sponsors for his next tech launch dropped out. And the PR firm that once plastered his face across magazines issued a statement. We do not represent clients who violate our values of respect and integrity. The empire he built with borrowed kindness and buried shame began to unravel. And then came the email. From a woman named Kara Sinclair, head of a community arts council in Atlanta. She had seen the clip. She had read the will leaked, though we never knew how. She wanted me to speak at a forum on generational debt, dignity, and motherhood. Your silence spoke volumes, she wrote. But if you're willing, your voice might build bridges. I hesitated. For so long, I had been quiet, forgotten, out of frame. But I said yes. The event took place in an old theater downtown. I wore a lavender dress I once bought for my husband's funeral. Travis drove me. My hands trembled as I stepped backstage. I was the final speaker. From the wings, I saw the crowd. Hundreds of faces, some teary, some curious, some angry for me, even though we had never met. Just as they called my name, I stepped forward and saw him. Richard. Trying to push past the front row, security moved to stop him, but the audience got there first. No, someone shouted. Sit down. You don't get to be here now. The murmurs turned into boos. People rose from their seats to block his path. I stood still for a moment, watching the same man who had once controlled every room now be shut out of one. I turned to the microphone. It was already live. I was told I shouldn't be in his pictures, I began, voice steady. He said I didn't belong in his stories, so I disappeared. I disappeared from interviews, from press releases, from memories, even from family dinners. I took a breath. But now, he's broken every mirror that might reflect me. And I am done cleaning up the glass. There was silence, then applause. I looked at Richard one last time. He had stopped fighting, his shoulders slumped, his eyes no longer wide with rage, but with something else. Realization, maybe. Or just the weight of finally being seen, the way he had always been. Let him carry that. I had stories to tell, and people ready to hear them. Court is never a quiet place, no matter how much the walls try to contain it. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse hall buzzed with tension. Lawyers whispered behind folders, heels clicked like nervous ticks across the tiled floor, and I, dressed in navy, hands folded tight, sat alone. Richard had filed for a full revocation of the new will. His claim? That I had lost mental capacity, and that I had been coerced by a manipulative outsider, meaning Travis. He also sought emergency custody of my only grandson, citing that I was no longer capable of sound judgment. They thought I would be fragile. They thought the courtroom lights would intimidate me into silence. They were wrong. The case began with Richard's team presenting a flurry of documents. A psychiatrist he had hired, someone who had never actually examined me, claimed I showed signs of cognitive decline. They referenced a voicemail I had once left that had a pause too long, a check I had written with a shaky signature, a prescription for blood pressure medication. They tried to stitch a story of a woman slipping. Then they called a neighbor who vaguely muttered that I sometimes forgot to bring in the trash bin. It was thin, but they hoped perception could outpace truth. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood and, with the calm of someone who had fought worse battles, laid out a timeline. My financial records, my prior will, the conscious steps I took before rewriting it, the verified consultation with legal counsel. It was airtight. Then came Travis. He sat tall in the witness chair, looking directly at the judge. "Ma'am is sharp," he said. "She still handles her own taxes. She reads the newspaper aloud when she thinks no one's listening. She helps me with crossword clues I don't even know." The judge cracked the faintest smile. Travis handed over a letter, handwritten, my own, dated a month before the restaurant incident. It laid out, in my words, why I was considering a new will. The judge read it silently, lips moving. Next came Dr. Pennington, my primary care physician for 10 years. She stated clearly that I showed no signs of cognitive decline. "Her memory's better than mine some days," she joked. But the final blow came from a clip. The same restaurant footage. "She's not with us." It echoed across the courtroom, followed by the laughter. The judge asked for it to be played again. "She's not with us." Silence followed. Then came her verdict. Based on testimony, documentation, and direct evidence, the court finds the most recent will to be valid and the testator to be of sound mind at the time of signing. Richard's lawyer stood, objected, denied. The judge raised her hand calmly. And regarding the request for guardianship, she continued, voice firm, Mr. Richard Cartwright, your behavior demonstrates emotional volatility, lack of respect for parental dignity, and disregard for familial responsibility. You failed custody not because of law, but because you failed love. That line cracked the courtroom like thunder. Richard's lips parted, but no words came. His wife stared down at the floor. A woman behind us gasped softly. No one moved. I didn't look at Richard, not even once more, because it wasn't about revenge. It was about setting the truth down in ink, in law, in record, so no one could erase it again. Outside, as the reporters gathered, I stepped into the light without flinching. The night Richard came to my house, I was not there. It was just past 10 when the porch light flickered to life under motion. I imagine he stood there for a long moment, hands unsure, breath shallow. The house was quiet, front windows dark, no TV humming inside. But the rocking chair on the porch was empty, its cushions neatly fluffed, a small envelope taped to the doorframe. He pulled it down and opened it under the porch light. I had written in my own hand, "You said I wasn't with you, so I moved on." That was all. Richard called my phone. I watched it vibrate on the nightstand beside Travis, where I had left it deliberately. I had gone to bed early, not to sleep, but to choose peace. It rang again, and again. Travis looked at me. I nodded once. He picked it up and answered calmly. "She's busy," he said. "She said you should say it in person." There was silence on the other end. Then, a whisper. "Please, tell her I lost everything. The company, my wife filed separation, sponsors are gone. The board pushed me out. Mom, please, I was wrong." But the line was no longer mine to carry. The next day, neighbors told us he had sat in his car for over an hour, just parked outside the gate. Then he drove off. No knock, no letter, no apology I could read in ink. And you know what? For the first time in decades, I did not ache for his pain. Because apologies whispered in ruin are not reparations. They're requests for rescue. And I had rescued him enough, for years, with silence, with sacrifice, with second chances. There was no more mother left to carry him. The following week, I replaced the rocking chair. Not because it was broken, but because that one belonged to the woman who waited, and she no longer lived here. People started calling me Grandma Justice. It started as a whisper, after my speech at the community auditorium. A little girl I had never met tugged my cardigan and said, "You're the grandma who made the bad man go away, right?" I smiled and nodded. She handed me a crayon drawing, a chair with a crown on it. I framed it and hung it in my new office at Second Roots, the community center Travis built, funded by part of the estate I redirected. It was modest, 3 converted classrooms and a repurposed gymnasium. But it was full of life. We offered workshops for seniors on financial independence, mentorship programs, free clinics, and storytelling nights where nobody interrupted the old voices. I taught a class called How to Say No Without Crying. We had waiting lists by the end of the second month. People came from all parts of Georgia. Some were women who'd been erased by their children. Others were men who had given decades to families that no longer remembered their birthdays. And the kids, they came too. To sit with us, to learn, to ask questions. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just someone's mother. I was someone's beginning. One Monday evening, I was helping a retired nurse with her application for a new Medicare plan when I heard a voice behind me, low, uncertain. "Is this where the center helps people start over?" I turned. There, hunched and hollow-eyed, stood Richard. He had lost weight. His suit hung like drapery. The once sharp part in his hair now sagged into disarray. There was no assistant, no camera, no watch on his wrist. I stood slowly. He took a step forward. "Mom, I have no place left to go." There were people behind him in line, an elderly veteran, a single mom with 2 toddlers, a woman pushing a walker. Richard looked over his shoulder, unsure. "Please," he said, "let me in." I walked up to him, calm and steady. "You told the waiter I wasn't with you," I said softly. "Fine." I walked out. "But now, I'll walk you out of my life entirely." His eyes filled, but I didn't stop. "Here, people earn their dignity. They stand in line. They carry their own names. If you want help, get in line like everyone else. Fill out a form, wait your turn. You're not my son here. You're just another man who forgot what love looks like." He tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "I paid for 14 strangers that night," I reminded him. "Tonight, the only seat that matters is the one for dignity, and you lost yours." I walked past him, back to the nurse who had been waiting patiently. Richard stayed in line, or maybe he didn't. I didn't turn around. The past does not deserve my gaze when the future is waiting. I wake early now, before the sky fully lightens, and I make my way to the wooden bench outside the doors of Second Roots. The wind is soft this morning, brushing the old oaks with gentle fingers. I cradle a mug of cinnamon tea, its steam rising in lazy spirals. In my lap lies my notebook, worn at the edges, pages marked by years of thoughts I never had the courage to send. I open it to a blank page and remember the voice I once promised to speak once I had strength enough. Some letters are addressed to Richard. I wrote lines like, "You told me I didn't belong. I walked out, now I walk on." Some to my younger self, "Be patient, be bold anyway." Some to strangers I helped, in shelters, in clinics, in times they asked for nothing but a listening ear. I do not sign them, I do not send them. I fold them into these pages in quiet acts of letting go. That morning, the first class at Second Roots was Writing Your Legacy. I had promised to read the excerpt from my notebook. The room filled with people, older men, young mothers, children with eyes too old for their years. They sat in a semicircle, notebooks open, pens poised. I read. I was told I should fade, that no one would notice me missing. I tried fading, but fading is lonely, so I chose to reappear in my own name. There was a silence after I spoke. Then a voice in the back said, "Thank you." And someone else nodded, small gestures, but enough. After the class, Travis came by. I saw him hesitate, then place a thick envelope on the corner of the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Something arrived," he said quietly. "From your bank. They asked me to deliver it." He paused. "You deserve to see this first." I slipped it into my pocket, and we went on with the day, healing circles, resume classes, story sessions. Late that evening, I sat alone under the lantern light on the porch. The envelope felt heavy. My fingers trembled as I pulled it open. Inside was a check, a cashier's check, the exact amount I had paid for those 14 meals that night in Savannah. The signature was anonymous. Beneath it, in handwriting that was refined yet shaky, "To the woman who reminded me what real class looks like. Table 6, Savannah." Table 6. I remembered. That was where a young couple had sat that night, across from Richard's table, glancing over with embarrassment and sympathy. They had whispered to each other. I had caught their eyes. I leaned back and let the weight of those words wash through me. I had paid for 14 strangers to remind someone that dignity is never forfeited by proximity. Weeks passed. Word spread of the check. Local newspapers ran the story. Mystery donor reimburses. Elderly mother's act of defiance. Social media picked up hashtags like Table 6 paid it forward, Mother worth more, Grandma justice. I did nothing. No press statements, no interviews. I kept teaching, helping, laughing with people who needed it. One crisp afternoon, Richard came again, this time not in a borrowed car. He walked up to the entrance of Second Roots. I saw him through the window, shoulders hunched, his steps measured. He paused at the threshold. Several people looked. Travis stood to the side. I felt the air catch. He looked at me, at the children coloring in the reading room, at the seniors lining up for the nutrition class. "Mom, please," he said. His voice cracked. "Let me in. I lost everything. I have nowhere else." I rose from my chair. The room fell silent. Children looked up. Volunteers paused mid-step. I walked toward him. You told the waiter I wasn't with you, I said gently. Fine. I walked out. But now, I'll walk you out of my life entirely. He swallowed. He tried to speak. The line cracked in his throat, but no words formed. I motioned to the sign in desk. Fill out the registration form like everyone else. Wait your turn. You are not my son here. You are a man who once erased me. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Someone behind him in line stepped forward, and I walked away. Kids greeted me by name. The woman from the literacy class handed me her completed certificate. The older man gave me his card, asking if I would speak at his church. I said yes. My steps were firm. Richard stayed paused in the lobby, indecision written across his face. Later that night, I sat on the porch with my notebook open. I wrote a new line. I was erased so many times they believed I would disappear, but the problem with bones is you can't bury them without breaking them first. Time moved on. Leaves turned. Snow arrived quietly, but winter that year was not cold for me, because for once I felt the warmth of purpose, of community, of standing in full view. People began to come to Second Roots, not for charity, but for dignity. They came into the doors and said to me, Grandma Justice, thank you. Others said, you're the bridge between what was and what can be. Many bowed their heads, tears in their eyes. Some left hugs. Some left whispers. One day, a man I had helped years ago walked into the center. He was now a teacher in another city. He asked if he could use the space to tutor children after school. I handed him the keys. He looked at me, wide-eyed, and said, You're alive. I nodded. Not just alive, unbound. I don't know what Richard is doing now. I hear rumors. He's been refused loans, turned away by partners, sued over contracts. I hear he teaches community college now, in a small town far from Georgia. I hear the name Langford no longer commands a room. Maybe it breaks him, or maybe it humbles him, that I cannot decide. What I know is this. I paid for 14 strangers that night, not to make you feel small, but to reclaim my worth. Tonight, the only seat that matters is the one for dignity, and you lost yours. And I will sit in that seat forever. Some stories end with applause. Others, like this one, end with quiet footsteps, walking away from what hurt and toward what heals. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you didn't belong, know this. Your seat at the table still exists. You just might have to build the table yourself. And if this story moved you, if you believe justice doesn't have to shout to be heard, subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because behind every quiet woman, there's a loud truth waiting to be told. Thank you for listening. We'll be here, telling the stories they thought we'd forget.